Khalid Azad has a passion for learning concepts at a deep, intuitive level. He writes at betterexplained.com, which serves millions of readers every year and is used in dozens of university courses. He's also authored a popular math book. It's a pleasure to welcome Khalid. Hi, Khalid. Thanks for joining us. I have to ask you first off, what got you interested in this wonderful intuitive approach to learning that you use?
It actually started with a really frustrating math class. I remember I was in my freshman year at Princeton. I had always enjoyed math in high school and middle school. And I was in my first class, and I was just getting destroyed. It was around the midterm, and I wasn't happy. Things weren't going well, and the subject that I'd always liked just wasn't making sense. I remember the finals had come around, and I was cramming and cramming and cramming. And suddenly some analogies started coming to me about twists and rotations and turns, and that really applied to the class. And so I was able to visualize the concepts instead of just looking at the symbols and the equations. And because of that, I didn't really need to memorize anymore. I could just think through it, and I could walk myself through my mental diagrams, and the equations kind of snap into place. And so after that, I realized that a lot of learning could become so much more pleasant and more fun after we found the right mental metaphors and diagrams and analogies, instead of trying to bash our heads against the raw definitions. And so from that, I started trying to write and share my insights that seemed to help me.
It sounds like we share the same approach. That's the kind of thing that I was trying to do too. I finally sort of cottoned onto that. So can you talk a little bit more about what approach you actually do use?
Sure. Just to keep things straight in my head, I have this little mnemonic I use, and I call it the ADEPT method. And basically, when I'm looking for an explanation of something, I try to find an analogy, a diagram, an example, a plain English description, and then a technical description. And the general idea is actually, it kind of relates to the diffuse thinking, is that when you're first learning, you want to start with the sort of fuzzy overview and then gradually sharpen it up until you get to the technical details at the end. So you start with the analogy, and you go to the diagram, you get some examples, you have a plain English description, and at the very end, that's when you go to the technical description. And you want to save that really focused thinking, for me, for last, because that's when I already have the framework in place to think about it.
Oh, I like that. Can you share a specific example of the ADEPT method?
Sure. I think one of my favorite topics is actually the imaginary numbers. So most people, myself included, for a long time, they just confuse me. They sound imaginary, are they real, are they fake? How can they be used in real life? And after breaking it down with the ADEPT method, I was able to find some metaphors that seemed to help me.
You just use an analogy then to start with this?
Yeah. So in this case, imaginary numbers, a lot of the times people start with the definition, the technical definition, and that doesn't really make things click. One thing that helped me was the analogy about a 90-degree turn. So if you imagine that negative numbers are sort of a full 180, so you're going forward, and you turn all the way 180 to backward. A imaginary number is basically, when you start forward, you actually just go up. So instead of going all the way backward, you're actually just going up. So you imagine maybe you're going east and west. Negatives are sort of flipping between east and west. But an imaginary number is the idea that, hey, maybe let's just take a 90-degree turn and go north. So now you're going along, and whoop, you go north, and suddenly you're in a different direction. It's not east or west, it's this new direction. It's a second dimension, really. And that's kind of the key analogy behind it.
So in some sense, then, this can actually become like a diagram or a map.
Exactly. This topic is really easy to visualize because we already have the idea of second dimensions and going different directions. So in my head, I kind of imagine just a number going along, and it gets a rotation, it turns, and then it turns again. So I had this mental diagram in my head, and that actually leads right into an example where, well, a lot of kids wonder, well, what happens when you take 4 left turns? Well, if you keep turning, you'll face back the same direction after 4 turns. And with imaginary numbers, if you turn 4 times, you'll face the positive numbers again. And so the idea is that your diagram can really, almost lead to an example that you can figure out intuitively without having to do a lot of math. You've kind of worked through the results on your own.
I used to do something very similar, but what I had was a visual with a toilet paper roll that was unrolling, sort of scrolling across the screen. It was a lot of fun. But moving on, so then you'd actually just use a plain English description?
Yeah, so once you've got your head around an analogy, a diagram, maybe gone through an example, you start sharpening up what you've understood, and you want to describe it in your own words. So rather than going right to the technical definitions, let's just think about what happened. I might say that, oh, we were moving in one direction and we moved 90 degrees, or we moved into a second dimension, or there's kind of a different type of number. Maybe there's one type of number that goes this way and one type that goes this way. In your head, you want to really get your own understanding, put it in your own words, and eventually you'll sharpen it up into a technical description. I think a lot of times we try to understand things just by somebody else's words instead of really internalizing it ourselves.
Well, I think this is the perfect example of the real imaginative world of mathematics and science and engineering. I mean, we imagine things in ways that people don't ordinarily imagine. And I love how you're approaching this because it really brings this to life. But what you do then is you move next onto an actual technical description of what you were describing?
Yeah, that's right. So the last step is finally to use the formal notation that mathematicians have come up with. My little analogy here, it's kind of like you have a song in your head. You might be humming it. You're humming it in your head, but other people don't really know what you're talking about. You need to find the sheet music. You need to explain, the scale that you're using and the notation, the timing. That way somebody else can really have a handle for what you mean instead of this little song that's going in your head. So we want to take, the rough words and kind of break them down to the formal notation. In the math world, the notation is I, lowercase I, and that basically represents the imaginary dimension. And it's kind of like the number one, but just in that imaginary dimension. And from there, now we can start talking about our ideas in a more technical sense. So when I say, oh, I want to face forward and take 2 turns and I'll be facing negative, what that means is you start with 1, you multiply by I, you multiply by I again, and you should be facing negative, which is negative. So a mathematician might write 1 times I equals negative 1. Now, you can simplify this. You can say, oh, 1 times I squared equals negative 1. And you can simplify it further by just saying I squared equals negative 1. And then the last step is if you really want to simplify it, you just take the square root of both sides, and now you can say that I equals the square root of negative 1. Now, this makes sense to us hopefully now because we've been able to walk through it step by step and turn our kind of intuitive, fuzzy description into the really technical one. And it's really painful if you start with a technical description, I equals the square root of negative 1, and try to guess what that could have meant. And the problem is you don't see all the steps ahead of time. So I realized for myself I really needed to start at the fuzzy level and work my way down to the technical level.
Yes, I think that's the thing about imaginary numbers. People often don't realize that they can dance, that they twist and rotate, and that's kind of what they do. And it's quite beautiful, actually. Do you have any final learning tips for our viewers?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip that I might say is just have a sense for yourself of when something's not clicking, and realize that it's probably just because of a missing piece. So, in the past, I might have just reread the same passage again and again because it wasn't working. But maybe you want to look for a diagram on Google Images, or maybe a talk or a slideshow or something that might have a different metaphor that can help you. I realize, with the adept, analogy diagram example, plain English technical, I need all the parts. It's kind of a part of a complete breakfast. I need all the different pieces, and then when I have them, I know the idea is really clicking in my mind. So if I'm working on something and it's just a technical or maybe an example, it's usually not enough for me to really internalize it, so I start searching for the other pieces. And I didn't even know there were other pieces that I should be looking for. So for me, it's kind of a checklist that helps me kind of zone in on what I need to look for.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know our viewers will benefit greatly from these ideas, which I myself have found really valuable. Thanks again.